Yesterday, Trump just announced a major victory for the United States. He said this marks the end of what he called not a conflict with Iran. The Strait of Hormuz is now open and will remain open permanently, and from Iran, all so-called nuclear waste can be removed. So both sides reached an agreement. But what happened? Not even a day later, by last night, Iran announced basically a complete reversal. So what's really going on here? What exactly happened? Sorry about that. Welcome to Good Morning America. Good Afternoon America, brought to you by Fangway. Well, actually, everyone still calls it Good Morning America. Hello to all our YouTube viewers and greetings to the listeners of Sound of Hope, Silicon Valley FM 96.1. All right, now let me explain to everyone. This is really a dramatic twist. What exactly is going on? Right now, things seem pretty chaotic. So yesterday morning, Trump tweeted from 9:06 to 10:40. In just 94 minutes, he posted 10 tweets. Basically, what he meant was that Iran had agreed to everything, including fully opening the Strait of Hormuz to the Americans and allowing them in, and letting Iran's nuclear waste be taken away directly. But by the evening, Iran started to completely deny everything. So what happened was this. First, Iran's Speaker of Parliament, Ghalibaf, tweeted at 6 p.m. last night, criticizing President Trump and saying that Trump had made 7 false statements within an hour. Clearly, he was referring to the 10 tweets Trump posted between 9:06 and 10:40 in the morning. So Ghalibaf said that if the current U.S. blockade continues, the Strait of Hormuz will no longer remain open. He also said that the U.S. hasn't won the war with these lies, and they absolutely won't achieve any results in negotiations either. He stated that any passage through the strait must be authorized by Iran and must follow designated routes. He also said that media warfare and manipulating public opinion are important parts of war. However, we will not be influenced by these tactics. In addition, according to the Tasnim news agency, citing a statement from Iran's foreign ministry, Iran said that enriched uranium is as sacred to us as Iranian territory itself, and under no circumstances will it ever be transferred anywhere else. They also added that uranium, enriched to over 60%, will absolutely never leave Iran in any way. According to the Associated Press, Iran has reimposed a blockade on the strait and has withdrawn its previous decision to open this waterway. So which part of Iran is responsible for this? The AP did specify that it was Iran's Joint Military Command, which stated that control over the Strait of Hormuz has returned to its previous status. It is now under the strict management and control of the armed forces, and as long as the United States continues to blockade Iran's ports, these restrictive measures will remain in place. So what's really going on here? First of all, on Air Force One, a reporter asked Trump what was happening, and Trump said, they just have to say that, otherwise there's no way to handle it, to respond. The hardliners at home, they have to cater to someone, meaning the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So Trump went on to say that what they're saying isn't what they really mean. But as for me, I just say whatever is true. So let's go back and review what actually happened. Indeed, yesterday morning, at the same time Trump was tweeting, Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister, Arakchi, did post on X, saying that according to the spirit of the Lebanon ceasefire agreement, all commercial vessels would be allowed to pass. The Strait of Hormuz passage would be fully open during the remaining ceasefire period. Of course, he also said that ships must follow the coordinated routes previously announced by Iran's port and maritime authorities. So you just follow that route? He said it's open, but stay on the path. Who wouldn't? Iran's president also stated yesterday they aren't seeking nuclear weapons or aiming to undermine regional stability. Okay, so you see, sorry about this, but finally, a news agency called FARS, which is affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was absolutely furious last night. They openly questioned. They openly questioned Iranian government officials and warned about possible domestic unrest. So actually, Iran has two different news agencies. One is called the Islamic Republic News Agency, which is official, and Fars is semi-official, or you could say it's the official agency of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That's the situation. But even on the official TV channel, you'll still see different opinions. For example, yesterday, a TV and film producer named Hossein Pak came out and harshly criticized the foreign minister on national television. He said that this diplomatic team lacks confidence, has failed to stand firm, and that their views don't align with the core principles and policies of the Iranian regime. He also said that what the foreign minister, Arakshi, said was just his own personal opinion. He also hinted that the foreign minister is not on the same page as Iran's supreme leader Khamenei's son. And then an Iranian member of parliament named Mahmoudi came out and said that if it weren't for the war, the foreign minister would have already been impeached. So, moving on, today an Indian oil tanker was approached by two Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps speedboats about 20 nautical miles northeast of Oman. And without issuing any warning, they opened fire directly on the Indian oil tanker. Now, India is very angry and has immediately summoned the Iranian ambassador. In response to the incident, where two ships flying the Indian flag were attacked, India has lodged a strong protest with Iran, demanding that Iran immediately restore the safe passage of Indian vessels. So, right, let's sum it up. There definitely has been a ceasefire. But what's the key point here? The key is who is actually observing the ceasefire? Who's blocking the ceasefire? While the president and foreign minister want one, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps doesn't. The Speaker of Parliament's stance is unclear, despite his recent negotiations. Could he be playing both sides, like Venezuela's Vice President Rodriguez once did? We can't be sure, but Iran is clearly facing internal conflict. So what's the second possibility? It's about whether the details have been agreed upon. As for the first one, well, we know that right now in Iran, whether it's the Revolutionary Guard, the government administration, or the religious institutions, it's unclear which of the three actually calls the shots. Actually, at this point, nobody really wants to go to war, but no one dares to show weakness either, because if you show weakness, you might get taken out in the internal power struggle. That's why you see these kinds of contradictory statements coming from the top, and now the whole world is watching this play out. As for the foreign minister, the foreign minister's name is something like Galibafah. So is it possible that his actions are like Rodriguez, tough in public but weak in private? We don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. But no matter what, if things keep going like this, it's just self-division, right? You want to go east, you want to go west, because as the saying goes, a divided house can't stand. Going forward, will Iran end up fighting itself and bringing itself down? That's the first reason. The second reason is about the details. Are the details being discussed? Let's use common sense here, because Trump said the Strait of Hormuz is now completely open. But then Trump went on to say, let me read Trump's exact words now. The Strait of Hormuz is now completely open, but the naval blockade against Iran will still remain in place until it is fully effective, until our deal with Iran is 100% completed. So that's what Trump said, but from Iran's perspective, Trump's meaning is very clear. If you don't finish the job, if you don't give me the nuclear material, I definitely won't let up. I'll keep my grip on your throat. And from the Iranian side, what the speaker means is, if you don't loosen your grip on my throat, I definitely won't give it to you, right? This is what's called a game of chicken. So that's the situation. Have the details been worked out? Probably not. So it's understandable from Trump's perspective, right? Right now, I'm choking you, just letting you weaken day by day, struggling to catch your breath. So just because of this, you want me to let go, but you haven't finished what you need to do. And Iran says, you're choking me. How can I agree to your terms? It's just this kind of classic argument, you know. The key point is what happens after Iran turns the tables. Right now, we're talking about a faction in Iran turning things around, the hardliners in Iran making a comeback. So after all this back and forth, will anything really change? Can this reversal actually succeed? My view is that they can't pull it off. Do you think they can? I don't think so, and here's why. Actually, there are a few reasons, 4 in total. First, Iran's momentum has already faded. Since they've said they're willing to agree to a ceasefire, it shows they're starting to lose their grip. That's the first important sign. Second, under the blockade by the U.S. military, Iran's income has dried up. The amount of unpaid wages will just keep piling up. Think about it. Let's take an example. If you were an Iranian soldier and you hadn't been paid for 3 months and there was no hope of getting paid in the future, what motivation would you have to risk your life for them? Don't you have a family to support? Every day you're out there with a gun dealing with civilians, so what then? To put it bluntly, can an asterisk support an army? Can an Iranian government with no money support an army? That's the first and most pressing question. Now, the second question. Iran's oil tanks, the available space is shrinking day by day. In another 10 days, by April 27th, all of Iran's oil storage tanks will be completely full. The oil industry will have to shut down, right? Now, the next reason is that the Chinese Communist Party is getting more anxious by the day, because if the U.S. blockade continues, then China just won't be able to get oil, right? So none of the factors that could force Iran to back down or even partially retreat have changed at all. So how can Iran possibly turn things around? The situation just can't change, right? As for Trump, he clearly doesn't care about dragging things out. First, Iran is finding it harder and harder to breathe, right? What is he worried about? The longer this goes on, the more Iran is gasping for air, isn't it? Second, the chances of internal conflict within Iran are also getting higher and higher. That's the situation, right? So the ceasefire Trump announced on April 7th is set to expire on the 21st. There are only 3 days left. A reporter has already asked Trump if the ceasefire will be extended. Trump said, I don't know. It might not be extended, so there are still 3 days left to watch how things play out. All right, let me sum things up again. What we know now is that there are disagreements within Iran, and there isn't a supreme leader. Khamenei isn't able to play the role of a true supreme leader, which is why there are conflicting voices. So what's really going on with Khamenei? At that press conference on Thursday morning with General Haggis, General Kane, and Brad Cooper, a reporter specifically asked, what exactly is going on with Khamenei? Haggis said they have no updates, only that he was seriously injured. He might be unconscious and held by the Revolutionary Guard, who are using the emperor as a hostage to control the feudal lords. So, of course, when you have a supreme leader, disputes below don't come up. But if you don't have a supreme leader, then it's obvious that he might actually be unconscious. That's when politics starts to come into play. So that's the first and most important reason. The second reason might be that the details with the United States haven't been fully discussed. And the third is, how do you deal with the issue of saving face? I'll talk about that in a bit. Let's first discuss how the United States has responded. The U.S. has done 3 things. First, the U.S. military has increased its deployments, and the U.S. Air Force is providing large-scale support to the Middle East. So if you look at some images online, you'll see military planes constantly flying to the Middle East. That's the first thing. Second, now, the U.S. is preparing not just to block, but to intercept and seize Iranian oil tankers, Iranian cargo ships, as well as Chinese vessels transporting weapons or weapon parts all around the world. This is similar to previous U.S. actions. Third, they might start targeting Iran's speedboats. Iran has these speedboats that patrol the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz, intercepting ships. The U.S. will likely strike them individually. President Trump said Iran wants to close the strait again, but they can't blackmail us. Things are actually progressing very smoothly, and there will be some news before tonight is over, so everyone should stay alert. Trump said that we are negotiating with them and that we are taking a tough stance. He also said that they have killed a lot of people. A lot of your comrades were killed by Iran. He was talking about many American soldiers, comrades in Iraq, who were killed or wounded by roadside bombs. Trump said, what we mean is that we won't show any mercy. All right, so the latest news, just 10 minutes before I started this show, is that Iran has announced it has nominated Pakistan as a potential third country for transferring enriched uranium. Well, so what does this mean if that's the case? It means that all this fuss Iran is making is really just about saving face. They just don't want to lose too much face. It's like when Iraqi announced the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, saying, hey, aren't you going to attack Hezbollah? Israel isn't attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. In fact, they're trying to disarm them. But Iran is using that as a way to save face. And now, according to this news, if they don't hand over the enriched uranium to the U.S., but instead give it to a third country, they're willing to compromise. So it's still all about face. It's still all about saving face. So right now, what we're seeing is that things inside Iran are a complete mess, just total chaos. Speaking of how Trump handled the Iran conflict, Professor Victor Davis Hanson from the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, a renowned American scholar and military historian, recently gave some commentary on this. Let me share it with y'all. He said, "We've never dealt with a country like Iran, with a population of 93 million. It has the reputation of being the most terrifying, dangerous, and unpredictable. It's known as the Ring of Fire, surrounded by a circle of criminal proxies, all under its command. Basically, a bunch of gangland henchmen. It controls the entire Middle East, in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Gaza, and Lebanon. It's truly intimidating." Professor Hanson said that the U.S. dared to do things in Iraq and Afghanistan, but for so many years, the Americans haven't dared to touch Iran. Iran has made 7 presidents feel afraid, not daring to take action against it. But President Trump took just 5 weeks to completely destroy Iran's ability to wage war. So he said that the war machine Iran spent about $25 million building over the past 47 years was destroyed by the United States. And in addition, Texas Senator Ted Cruz said that Iran's ballistic missiles are gone, their ballistic missile manufacturing capability is gone, their drones are gone, their drone manufacturing capability is gone, their air force is gone, their navy is gone, their air defense systems are gone, and even their supreme leader is gone. He said that almost all of their top military commanders have disappeared. He said this is an unprecedented military catastrophe. Iran spent 40 years building up its military strength, and we destroyed it completely in just 39 days. He means that Trump deserves a lot of praise. Why did he say 39 days? He's talking about the period before the ceasefire, right? From February 28th to April 7th. That's 39 days to completely destroy Iran. That's what Ted Cruz said. Do you agree with what they're saying? One of them is Ted Cruz. All right, next, let's talk about how China is reacting to all this. Trump, well, he recently tweeted, he's doing his homework, he tweeted yesterday. He said that President Xi Jinping is very pleased about the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, or rather that it is rapidly reopening. Our meeting in China will be a special one, and it could even become a historic moment. He said, "I'm really looking forward to meeting with President Xi. Our meeting will achieve a lot of results." At the same time, Trump immediately retweeted another post. This tweet was from Newsmax's well-known evening host, Robert Skimmett, and it was a segment called A News Monologue, called The Monologue. What did he say? He said there's an unexpected piece of news. Russia is now willing to use the U.S. dollar again for transactions. And this move has left the Chinese Communist Party in a panic, because it would be a major blow to the CCP's efforts to de-dollarize among the BRICS countries. China and Russia have long pushed for de-dollarization. In fact, 95% of their trade is settled in rubles and yuan. But earlier, a Russian memo discussed returning to the U.S. dollar for some U.S. economic cooperation. So if this move is actually carried out, Eric says it would throw the Chinese Communist Party into a panic. Trump then retweeted this, and this whole thing is pretty interesting. So you can see that what Trump says publicly and what he actually thinks can be two different things. But as everyone knows, in many situations, what Trump says publicly is exactly what he thinks privately. There are only two exceptions that I've noticed. One exception is when he talks about the Chinese Communist Party. What he says publicly is completely different from what he thinks privately. The second is with countries like North Korea. So recently, Chinese media, including the South China Morning Post, have reported that Trump's visit to China has been shortened from 3 days to 1.5 days. Whether this is true or not, since the White House hasn't confirmed it, I personally think it's true. because he wants to lower public expectations ahead of time or manage expectations so that when the time comes, if people say something like Trump doesn't care about China, it's already been put out there. This also shows another issue. Trump is really just going through the motions with the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping. He's not genuinely interested. Trump often calls Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un his good friends. But with Trump, the more he praises you, the more danger you're actually in. Isn't that right? Also, let me tell everyone about something recent. There's this thing called the Valley Forum. What is the Valley Forum? It's actually a forum between Capitol Hill and Silicon Valley called Building a Bridge Between Silicon Valley and Capitol Hill. Its slogan is about building a bridge of communication between Silicon Valley, the tech hub, and Capitol Hill, the political center. So recently, there's been some news. America's largest investment bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, their CEO, their president is called Jamie Dimon. So when Dimon was interviewed, he said, let me read you exactly what he said. Listen up. He said, investing in China in this regard, we made a huge mistake. Here, when I say we, I mean the American business community, government, and military. In 2001, we let the Chinese Communist Party join the WTO. At the time, everyone generally thought that this would make the CCP more democratic and more free, but in reality, things didn't really develop in that direction. Too many American companies, just because a piece of equipment could be $10 cheaper, or even just a little bit cheaper, they recklessly shifted their supply chains to China for production or procurement. He said that American companies made a lot of money in China. Their attitude was basically, don't interfere with my business over there, just leave me alone. But Dimon said, looking back now, this was a mistake. Dimon said, what are we supposed to do now about rare earths, pharmaceuticals, or the parts needed for F-35 fighter jets? Is our supply chain under pressure now? He said, we have to ask ourselves, what if one day they become our adversary? Of course, by they, he means the Chinese Communist Party. Can our supply chain still guarantee that we get everything we need? Now is exactly the time for change. This is what Dimon said, right? You all know Dimon, right? To shed some light on who he is, he's not an extremist. What he says basically represents Wall Street. As you know, for so many years, during the so-called 40 or 50 years of China's reform and opening up, Wall Street has always been the main force pressuring Washington, pressuring the U.S. government to engage with, get closer to, and be friendly with the Chinese Communist Party. In other words, China, or rather the Chinese Communist Party, has always been Wall Street's good friend. But the thing is, if a business person lacks common sense, they're bound to fail. So when they face reality, well, they can recognize reality and accept it, even though, how should I put it? Their business comes first mentality sometimes blinds them. That is to say, now, when we look at Dimon, there have been two clear shifts. In the past 2 or 3 weeks, what I've noticed first is a gradual and clear recognition of President Trump's policies, including his DEI policies, well as anti-DEI policies. Second, there's a gradual and clear recognition of the Chinese Communist Party. So this is really important. As you all know, if the American political world loses the strong influence of the business community, or if the business community also holds this view of the Communist Party, then the political, business, and military sectors in the U.S. will all become clearly anti-communist forces. Under pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, the pressure will really be overwhelming. That's just how it is. Also, while we're on this topic, let me mention something else that's related to Chinese diplomacy. There's a Japanese ship called Lei She. In English, it's called Akazuchi. The Akazuchi-class destroyer recently passed through the Taiwan Strait, and China was furious about it. They were up in arms, saying this was a deliberate provocation, and they sent out forces to monitor the entire passage. So what does Japan have to say about this? According to Japan, their warship was heading to participate in the joint military exercise called Balikatan 2026, which will be held by the U.S., the Philippines, and Japan on April 20th. But here's the thing, the location of the exercise, if Japan wanted to get there, they could have just sailed straight down along the east coast of Taiwan from Japan, and that would have been it. But instead, they insisted on taking a detour to the west, deliberately going around the Taiwan Strait, making the trip longer for no real reason. The goal is to challenge the Chinese Communist Party. For the fourth time in history, and the first under Sanae Takaichi, Japanese warships will independently navigate the Taiwan Strait starting in early 2025. This back-and-forth movement asserts these are international waters, not territorial seas, so they cannot be claimed. We'll come whenever we want, so this is also Sanae Takaichi following through on her word. The idea that if something happens to Taiwan, it's as if it's happening to Japan, she's making good on that promise. They're directly sending warships to the Taiwan Strait to show military strength. In other words, Japan providing military support to Taiwan is becoming something normal and can be expected. Also, not long ago, the Chinese Communist Party banned Chinese tourists from traveling to Japan, right? The purpose was to use this method to suppress Japan's tourism industry. But the results for Japan's tourism sector have just come out recently. The number of tourists visiting Japan from Taiwan has increased significantly. Last month, Japan's tourism revenue hit a record high. Of course, tourism revenue from China to Japan has plummeted by 50%. In January, the number of Chinese tourists dropped sharply by 61%, and in March, it also fell by 56%. But what no one expected is that Taiwan, a small island with only 23 million people, actually brought in more tourism revenue for Japan than the total from mainland China's 1.4 billion people. Taiwan's tourism revenue growth for Japan was high, with an increase of 22.5%. At the same time, there were also a lot of visitors from Vietnam with a 71% increase, Germany with a 60% increase, and Spain with a 64% increase. So even during the peak of the Chinese Communist Party's boycott this February, Japan's tourism still set a new record for tourism.